Good morning. It is Wednesday, June 26th, 2024. I'm Senior Meteorologist Andrew Pritchard, filling in for Eric Snodgrass, who's continuing to enjoy some well-deserved time off this week. We'll start off with the radar here early Wednesday morning. Several clusters of thunderstorms ongoing across the central U.S. Got a pretty big squall line here continuing to sink south across portions of eastern Kansas into Missouri. That'll make its way into northeast Oklahoma, into northern Arkansas later on this morning. Scattered showers and storms ongoing across portions of the Mid-South into the Ohio Valley. You can see a little front sinking southward across the region right now. Just some scattered showers along that right now, but maybe seeing some thunderstorms flaring up as we get toward midday. Get that sun to come out and kind of heat up the environment across northern and central Illinois. And then we've got some scattered thunderstorms associated with monsoon activity in our next incoming trough across portions of the interior west. Now, as we look at the last 72 hours of precipitation, a lot of this in the central U.S. occurring in the last 24 to 36 hours with these thunderstorm clusters. Of course, Matt pointed out the big squall line, the big bow echo across portions of the upper Midwest, across Wisconsin, Lake Michigan, into lower Michigan. Yesterday morning, we saw an isolated severe storm producing, large hail, damaging winds across northeastern Illinois during the early morning hours. We'll blow this up just a little bit. And then as we head through the later part of the day, Tuesday afternoon, Tuesday evening, we saw another squall line flaring up across portions of the Midwest. Several of these scattered thunderstorm clusters, and then a little more isolated as you make your way further to the west. We saw one lone supercell thunderstorm producing big hail, strong winds, and even a couple of tornadoes as it made its way through the sandhills here in western Nebraska, and then even an isolated supercell thunderstorm in parts of north central Oklahoma, producing some isolated severe weather impacts as well. A lot of lightning with this thunderstorm activity. This is a current look here from that blitzortung.org website. You're welcome to pull that up. A wonderful website for tracking lightning activity. But these are the real-time flashes ongoing with that squall line across parts of the Kansas and Missouri into northwest Oklahoma, northern Arkansas, and those thunderstorm clusters across the Mid-South. Yesterday, 430,000 strikes of lightning across North America. And again, a lot of that associated with those thunderstorm clusters that were producing torrential rainfall, some severe weather impacts, and a lot of lightning. Speaking of those severe weather impacts, this is the storm reports yesterday. A lot of blue dots on there. That is typical this time of year. Those are damaging wind reports. The green dots would be the hail, and then a couple of tornadoes, again, across western Nebraska, and then along a front here that was kind of draped along Interstate 80 from the Omaha area toward Des Moines, back toward the Quad Cities. I'll show you an animation here where we had some thunderstorms flaring up on this boundary where we had some pretty good convergence, a lot of instability, a lot of fuel for those storms, and they went up so quickly, they're able to kind of stretch some of the vorticity along that boundary and begin to rotate and produce a couple of tornadoes. So here's what that looked like yesterday. This is the visible satellite animation, generally from mid-morning on Tuesday through sunset on Tuesday evening. A lot to see here. I love just staring at the satellite animations during the summertime. There's always so much to see. Now here's your big thunderstorm complex, that squall line that made its way through parts of central Illinois during the morning hours on Tuesday. This would be kind of Interstate 72, 74, 80 up here. What I want you to see here is that thin line that kind of rushes out from that thunderstorm complex. That's what we call the outflow boundary, that boundary that separates the rain-cooled air from the thunderstorm complex and the hot, muggy air out ahead of it. So these thunderstorm complexes, they generate a lot of rain-cooled air. On a day like yesterday, there's not a lot of wind shear to help the storms kind of, contain that rain-cooled air. So it surges out ahead of the thunderstorm complex. As that cooler air surges ahead, it hits the warmer, more humid air out ahead of it, forces that air upward, we generate cumulus clouds, and so that's how we're able to easily see that boundary as it surges ahead. It's defined by a thin boundary of cumulus clouds that at times can generate new thunderstorms as it gets further out there, taps into that some of that instability, that fuel. We can actually generate a second round of thunderstorms, and that is what makes forecasting this clustered thunderstorm activity so difficult as we get to this time of the year, into the summer. It's not a cop-out from your local meteorologist. This is tricky because it's kind of like what happens the next 24 to 48 hours depends on what happens the next 24 hours. What happens in the next 24 hours depends on what happens the next 12 to 24 hours. And this is what we mean. Where does this thunderstorm complex form? Where is it going to, steer itself? When will it spit out this outflow boundary? How far ahead will that boundary surge? Where is it going to be during peak heating? Because that's where we would expect that second round to flare up. And then behind that morning thunderstorm complex, this is where the main event then happens later in the day. Storms exit, we get clearing skies behind, the sun comes out, it's late June, it doesn't take long to heat it back up. Temperatures soared into the 90s with dew points in the low 70s along this frontal boundary. So by mid-afternoon, thunderstorms explode along that front, and it's right here, again, where we had, explosive instability. We have that little boundary where on the north side of the boundary, the winds are coming in from the north. On the south side of the boundary, the winds are coming in from the south. So a lot of forcing there to help these thunderstorms erupt. And again, as they do so very quickly, they can sometimes stretch some of that vorticity. It's almost like a figure skater who's spinning slowly, and then they pull in their arms and they start spinning much faster. You can kind of imagine that happening here with the weather. The boundary has some very gentle vorticity along it, just some kind of ambient spin. Well, then we take an explosive summertime thunderstorm updraft and stretch that very quickly. It helps it tighten it into a bit of a vortex, and you could generate a tornado there on a day when, maybe the parameters otherwise weren't necessarily supportive of supercell thunderstorms and tornadoes. So again, fascinating to watch the boundary sink south, watching new storms developing along the boundary. We watched things clear out on the backside of those storms, and where we saw the sunshine, we saw those thunderstorms flaring back up. And then here across central Illinois, this was where the big question mark was. Will these storms clear out in time to allow the atmosphere to recover to get a second round of storms to develop along the incoming front? And the answer here was no. These clouds stuck around all day. It was not sunny, hot, and humid across central Illinois. It was cloudy, overcast, and a bit cooler. Because of that, we kept a lid on thunderstorm activity during the last part of the day. So here in Champaign, Illinois, we got our morning storms. That was it for the day, though, as we kind of shut things back down. Now, here in Champaign, we did have a very fascinating, pretty rare weather event. So the thunderstorms came through around 10 or 11 in the morning. We got some nice rain and thunder that tapered off into the early afternoon. And then suddenly, right around 2:30 in the afternoon, very strong winds came sweeping through the Champaign-Urbana metro, where we have our office here, parts of Champaign County in east central Illinois. I got a phone call from my brother who lives on the west side of town who said, "Hey, is it incredibly windy at your house?" And I said, "No, not yet anyway." And I waited about 5 minutes, and then sure enough, here came these winds sweeping in, blowing down power lines. These are some lines that are leaning at 45 degrees just south of our office here, south of the intersection of First Street and Windsor. We had trees that were blown down. You can see the trees in this photo here still kind of being buffeted by those very strong southerly winds as police and public works crews worked to clear the trees from the roadways. A lot of scenes like this. Again, not extensive damage, but a lot of unexpected wind damage across the area. These storms exited the area 4 hours earlier before 64 mile per hour wind gust was measured at Willard Airport just south of Champaign-Urbana. Power outages, trees coming down, even an apartment complex in Champaign that caught on fire because power lines were blown down on top of the roof there. So unexpected weather event. What was going on? Well, this was a wake low. This is not something that is in itself uncommon. It's very typical to see these areas of low pressure develop behind a departing thunderstorm complex. So what happens is this, thunderstorm complex that we talked about making its way through central Illinois yesterday generated a lot of rain-cooled air. Because of that, we can develop what we call a meso-high, or a trailing area of high pressure on the backside. And as the atmosphere works to kind of restore balance, we can get a trailing meso-low. And what happened then is we've got the clockwise flow around the area of high pressure, counterclockwise flow around the area of low pressure. And where those winds meet here right in the middle, they can be kind of squeezed or funneled in where that pressure gradient force is very strong. And so again, it's not uncommon behind some of these thunderstorm complexes to get some breezy conditions, winds blowing 30 to 40 miles per hour. But this was an extreme instance where we generated winds 60, 65 miles per hour, perhaps even higher in some areas where we did not have a wind gauge measuring the wind speeds there. But 64 mile per hour winds through Champaign-Urbana, lots of wind damage from this meso-low. Really fascinating event. More severe weather to talk about over the next 72 hours, though. We'll check in with the severe weather outlook today. A slight risk across parts of the eastern U.S., the mid-Atlantic, portions of the far eastern Ohio Valley. Again, that thunderstorm complex continuing to sink south into the southern U.S., a slight risk there, and then we'll expect scattered storms to develop across the high plains. Slight risk in place across those regions today as well. As we get into the day tomorrow, this will be Thursday, again, looking at scattered severe storms across the high plains into the central plains. This again from the next storm system that will be making its way in, and that's going to shift the risk further into the Midwest again as we get into Friday. This is the slight risk area put out by the Storm Prediction Center on Friday. encompassing parts of the mid-Missouri Valley here into the mid-Mississippi Valley, parts of Illinois, Iowa, Missouri, Nebraska, and Kansas, most at risk. But along the incoming front, anywhere from the Canadian border down into the Central Plains, going to see the risk for at least isolated strong thunderstorms on Friday. Now, we'll look at all this with the high-resolution NAM model. We'll go ahead and skip on in here to mid-morning on Wednesday. And here you've got your squall line sinking south. Again, the slight risk for severe storms across this region. We've also got that slight risk across the high plains and the mid-Atlantic. We'll watch for storms to form in those areas as we get toward the later part of the day. You see that here. This is now 4 p.m. Parts of Pennsylvania into New York State. The eastern Corn Belt starting to pop back up with those thunderstorms, and then the interior west into the high plains starts to flare up mid-afternoon as well. So we get to about sunset tonight. This is what we've got. Thunderstorm clusters across the high plains, a couple clusters of storms possible across the southern U.S., and then scattered storms from the mid-Atlantic through the Ohio Valley as that storm system departs. We just kind of got this parade of systems across the U.S. We've had that for the last couple of weeks. We'll continue to see it for the next couple of weeks. We'll take this into Thursday. Again, we know that the slight risk across the high plains here on Thursday afternoon. That's where that chance of storms will be highest. Central and eastern Corn Belt getting a break on Thursday as we see high pressure briefly slide in on the backside of our departing storm system. Look at all the thunderstorm activity flaring up by the time we get to about sunset Thursday afternoon and evening across the western U.S. into the northern and central plains. You see this area of low pressure kind of tracking along the 49th across the Canadian Prairie through the upper Midwest, really the northern plains. That makes its way into the upper Midwest on Friday. The trailing cold front then is going to be the focus for thunderstorm activity on Friday afternoon and evening. You can kind of make it out here. That comma shape, area of low pressure up here near the Canadian border. Cold front extending south from that. So anywhere from the Canadian border, the upper Midwest, down into the mid-Mississippi Valley, you'll be in line for those thunderstorms on Friday. Of course, we continue to do a balance here. You know, there are some folks who need this rain. There are some folks who really need the rain to stop. And unfortunately, the storms are going to continue to kind of ride that line where parts of the Dakotas, the upper Midwest, that really need to see a little bit of a break from the rain, they're going to continue to see it over the next couple of weeks. And then just south of that line, kind of along Interstate 80 and south, I think is kind of that rough cutoff between the folks who really need the rain to stop and the folks who could stand to see a little bit more of that rain over the next couple of weeks. And as we look at the next, this is actually the river flood gauges. Again, one more way to kind of look at the folks who don't need that. A lot of rivers here approaching or well beyond their flood stage. That continues to make its way south here as the rivers continue to kind of drain here over the next several days. But a lot of folks here are really kind of, in a tenuous situation as we deal with repeated heavy rainfall. And as Matt kind of outlined here and Eric in his last videos here, we're not talking about just a little bit too much rain. We're talking about, 8 to 10 inches, some areas seeing more of that over the last week or so. Just a lot of moisture and much more than soil or infrastructure or some of the rivers here can really handle. We'll still talk about some heat south of that line here again, where the thunderstorm activity does not cool things off. Still looking at temperatures climbing into the 90s, up to near 100 degrees today with those muggy conditions. It is not going to be comfortable, and in some cases, dangerously hot there. So if you've got outdoor activities across parts of the Red River, Oklahoma, Texas, down into the deep south, of course, you know the drill this time of year. Get those activities done as early or as late in the day as you can. Avoid the hours of peak heating here, as it's going to be quite uncomfortable. We'll go ahead and take a look at the high temperatures the next couple of days. Again, you see those readings in the upper 90s to near 100 degrees across the Red River, combined with muggy conditions. It is not going to be pleasant. Bluer shading up here, a little bit cooler on the backside of that departing system. Again, all the thunderstorm activity in the area yesterday. That front continues to sink south and east of the region. Will be a little bit cooler on the backside of that, getting a break from the summer heat that's been in place there. Here's your highs on Thursday. We get into Friday. Again, the next system starts to move in, so we start to see southerly flow in advance of that, bringing warm and humid air back in. We'll see that heat back in place as we get into the late part of the week across the central and eastern Corn Belt. Off to the north, though, you continue to see pushes of cooler air on the backside of these storm systems. Saturday afternoon, high temperatures in the 60s across the Dakotas, parts of the upper Midwest, just in the lower 70s across Nebraska and Iowa. It's going to feel much cooler compared to what we would normally be expecting here in the last week of June. Now, as we kind of just look at the European model, the forecast here with the jet stream, we see these systems continuing to just parade across the region. So here's that upper level trough right now that's kicking off all the thunderstorm activity that impacted the Central Plains, the Midwest yesterday, continuing to push off into the Mid-South and the Mid-Atlantic today. We'll go ahead and take this through Thursday. Here comes the next system now, making its way in through the Northwest Thursday afternoon. Kind of caught in the middle here. This is why we get that break in the central and eastern U.S., feeling a little bit of that, subtle ridging between the two troughs. The next system making its way in on Thursday evening into Thursday evening into Thursday night. Again, this is the region that will be looking for severe storms on Thursday afternoon and evening. We'll take this into Friday. This would now be getting into, kind of Friday evening, Saturday morning. We see the system making its way now into the central U.S., so this is where that thunderstorm activity expected to be highest on Friday and Saturday, making its way into the central and eastern Corn Belt. This system departs, and then we see the same thing here. If I could get this to kind of reload, my slider is not wanting to work. There we go. We'll slide this into early next week. Here we go. Monday, getting into July 1st, July 2nd, beginning the month of July with another storm system making its way through really the exact same track. We continue to see this ridge of high pressure kind of just wobbling across the southern U.S. Meanwhile, a very energized, very active jet stream with a lot of momentum continues to kind of run along the U.S. and Canada border, and it is riddled with storm systems. So we see the same kind of pattern just repeating every 3 days or so, with routine rounds of showers and storms across the northern plains, the upper Midwest, portions of the western and central Corn Belt, with heat kind of ebbing and flowing across the southern U.S. You kind of see it here. This is the precipitable water chart. So this is showing how much water is in the atmosphere, the whole column of the atmosphere from the ground all the way up. So kind of just saying if we were to take all the moisture above our heads and wring it out, how much would we have? And so I like to animate this because it really, you can see some of the pattern coming through here. Again, you see the front crashing through the eastern Corn Belt today. You'll see this kind of repeat where fronts come swinging through. They do their thing. They kick off showers and storms. They exit, and then we see moisture returning. The next system comes in, starts drawing moisture northward into it. So here we go. This is Thursday. You'll watch that moisture being drawn into the middle of the country. This is your Thursday, Friday, Saturday thunderstorm fuel from the high plains into the central U.S., into the mid-Mississippi Valley. Over the weekend, we get to Sunday. You see that front sweep through, kind of clears it out. It becomes cooler, less humid. But then you watch the moisture start to feed back northward. It kind of starts crawling back up the plains from the Gulf of Mexico in advance of the next system that comes in here in the first couple of days of July. Again, I showed you that next trough, July 1st and 2nd. Here's the feed of moisture being drawn northward into it. That is going to kick off thunderstorms anywhere from the Canadian Prairie through the northern plains into parts of the western and central Corn Belt, the mid-Mississippi Valley. The same areas that have seen thunderstorm activity will continue to see it over the next couple of weeks. Here's what we'll look at this then verbatim from the European model. Again, we'll take it through the early morning hours on Wednesday into the mid-afternoon hours on Wednesday. This model not going to get everything exactly right. We've already kind of run through the near term with the high-resolution NAM model, but you see the thunderstorms running off through the mid-Atlantic, thunderstorm clusters in the southern U.S., and then additionally looking for thunderstorm clusters across the high plains over the next 24 hours or so. We get into Thursday afternoon and evening. The next storm system begins to run along the U.S.-Canada border with a cold front extending south from that. That's where we expect, again, renewed shower and storm chances. Thursday, that risk highest across the northern and central plains. Friday, that risk shifts into the mid-Mississippi Valley, parts of the Missouri Valley. And then on Saturday, we'll look for that risk to shift into parts of the eastern Corn Belt, the Ohio Valley, although in the northeast here, those starting to fade as it does so. And then we kind of reload for the back half of the weekend. Again, here's the area of high pressure that comes in on the backside. The departing area of low pressure, a frontal boundary kind of extending back into the plains. And then we get the next storm system that comes through. It just rides along that frontal boundary. We get the exact same thing happening. So here's your forecast then for July 1st, July 2nd, getting into July 3rd. It's just kind of a cut, paste, repeat. Storm systems running along this area, trailing frontal boundary, clusters of thunderstorms along that frontal boundary. So that's why we end up with, a forecast that looks like this the next 7 days, where we expect an inch or more of precipitation. Well, the Canadian Prairie continues to be a big winner. We've talked long and hard about a favorable pattern heading into the growing season across that region. We are seeing that pay off with routine rounds of moisture, not too much in the way of prolonged heat. But then here, areas that really don't need a whole lot more in the rain category. Parts of Nebraska, getting into Iowa. Again, Interstate 80, kind of that cutoff. So it is true, a lot of folks south of this line here, they could use that inch of rain here. There are some pockets that saw heavy rainfall in the last 48 hours, but a lot of folks south of I-80 that could, stand to see a little bit more in the way of routine rain. Same is true for a lot of the eastern Corn Belt, parts of the Ohio Valley, where, again, not the driest year, certainly not compared to 2023, but with a week or two of heat starting to compound things here, we could certainly use one of these well-placed thunderstorm clusters, hopefully without much in the way of severe weather. We'll go ahead and take a look at the European ensemble, the probability of picking up an inch or more of rain over the next 10 days. So where you see the deep red, that's where you've got about a 90 to 100% chance of picking up 1 inch of rain or more by the time we get to July 5th. Again, the Canadian Prairie, big winners, and then right here in the central U.S., again, a lot of this in the next 5 days or so. With this repeating pattern, anywhere from the Missouri Valley into the mid-Mississippi Valley, looking at that pretty good chance of picking up an inch or more of rain. And then really surrounding that, there's a lot of folks where we're going to be seeing these routine thunderstorm clusters for at least the next week, if not a little bit more. We'll take it out a little bit further, looking at the 8 to 14 day outlook from NOAA. Again, that ridge continues to just ebb and flow and kind of wobble around the southern U.S. And with flow coming around that, an energized jet stream coming in from the Pacific, we continue to see the chance for routine showers and storms anywhere from, the monsoon activity in the southwest. Again, these disturbances ride over the top of the ridge. They meet this active storm track, and we get regular shower and thunderstorm activity, regular storm systems across this region. So the entire Corn Belt looking at the chance for above normal precipitation over the next 8 to 14 days as this active pattern continues to roll on across the region. That's what I've got for you right now. This pattern really continues over the next 7 to 10 days. We'll talk about what's going on tomorrow morning. I'll be back with you tomorrow on Thursday. Take a little bit of a deeper dive into what's going on over the next couple of weeks. Although really, if I'm being candid with you, Eric Snodgrass, Matt Reardon, they are your voices to trust on the long range. I'm happy to keep it focused on the shorter range, the near-term impacts here, but I'm excited to have an opportunity just to work with you. I also have a hard time stopping talking. So have a great Wednesday. I'll be with you again tomorrow, Thursday, June 27th.